Today's episode has been brought to you by Scoliosis.
Welcome to episode 84 of the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast. Today we hear from Christine, a yoga teacher who specializes in sharing both group and one-on-one yoga, online and in person with those who have scoliosis. If you are listening to this episode from your phone and you can safely take a photo or video of what you're doing while you're listening, share it and tag me either on Instagram or Facebook. On Instagram, I'm Shannon Crow Yoga. On Facebook, it's the Connected Yoga Teacher. Heads up, near the end of this episode, in the show notes, you're going to find some great links, and especially because Christine has a gift for all of our listeners and one amazing gift for a lucky winner. We're going to do a draw for today's episode. I will share more about that at the end of the interview. For those who don't know me, my name is Shannon Crow. I'm a mother of three, a yoga teacher, and also a consultant and trainer for yoga teachers. I get how isolating it can feel in the wilderness of yoga entrepreneurship. That is why this podcast was created for you. Every week between the classes, workshops, and trainings that you're teaching or attending, you can connect to information, ideas, and a supportive community of other yoga teachers. Speaking of supportive community, if you are not already a member of the Connected Yoga Teacher Facebook group, come and join us. As I'm recording this, we have officially reached 4,000 members plus. Visit theconnectedyogateacher.com and look for the join button on our homepage. In the Facebook group this week, I shared a live video and challenged everyone else to do the same if they want to, showing the space where they teach yoga. It has been so great to see you guys and where you teach. Right away, Ron and Joe from Australia jumped in to share a video, Elena from Russia, Maria from Canada, and Jenny from the United States. So you can tell that we are a growing and global group. If you have been listening here over the last few weeks, you'll know that I've been sharing a struggle that I've been having and an exciting brand new group program that I'm putting together. It was a struggle to launch, and for me, this is sometimes a common thing. And I wanted to share so that you can hear what it's like for me in real time to really be living in that. Doing new things can be scary, but once I put the outline together, I knew I had to get this out there. And still, it was scary. It's not like, oh, I got the outline together and then it was easy. Now, let me tell you one secret with this. Putting it on the podcast really motivated me because I'd put it out there. I send the audio to our editor a couple weeks early, so I knew that I had some time to create the landing page, but sure enough, I waited until the last minute to get that landing page done. So I had told all of you that the landing page would be ready, and I'm admitting right now that my ducks were not all in a row, and it was kind of a scramble with feathers flying to get them there. But I did it, and already we have some people who have signed up and who have said, I'm in. We still have a couple of spots in case you're wanting to sign up for this group program. And for those who can't make this time, just know that we're going to do it again. We have a new group already forming. Some people have reached out and said, I really want to join, but I can't make that time. And I'm going to find another time in the schedule to do that. So to find out more or fill out the application form, go to theconnectedyogateacher.com/community. It will only be the people who have filled out an application form that will be contacted about this. As a side note, if you're thinking about launching something, is there a way that you can set a deadline to get it out there? Kind of like I did, a way of sort of forcing yourself to do it. Can you tell someone that it's on its way so that you have that motivation to take the next step to make it happen? And also, what if you give yourself permission to launch it even though it isn't perfect? So my landing page isn't what I had in my mind, but I knew I had to get it done that day. So can you do it imperfectly? Before we meet Christine and learn more about scoliosis and how yoga can help, let's hear from our friends over at Scoliosis.
Hello, Connected Yoga Teachers. This is Allie from Scoliosis with the hot tip of the week. We've talked a lot about how Scoliosis can help your class-based business, but we know many teachers also offer one-on-one services like Thai massage. Through your Scoliosis account, you can seamlessly book and manage those services alongside your group classes and workshops. Those calendars are integrated together so you'll never be double booked. If you create a new class that conflicts with another appointment on your schedule, a window will pop up to warn you of the exact dates and times that interfere. We've got your back so you can take care of your clients' backs.
Thank you, Scoliosis. Alrighty, let's dive in and meet Christine. Let me first pronounce Christine's name because I've been working on it. It's Christine Jaureguiberry. Christine has suffered from back pain as a teenager. Scoliosis was causing a lot of tension in her upper back and neck and was showing up as quote-unquote poor posture. Christine saw many physiotherapists, osteopaths, and chiropractors over the years looking for a solution, but nothing was giving her lasting effects. Then Christine tried yoga, and she finally felt like that gave her control over her own well-being. She tried various styles of yoga and said that yoga really helped not only with the scoliosis, but also through her 2 pregnancies and births. Christine believes that yoga is for everyone, not just fit and flexible bodies. Let's dive in and meet her. Welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher Podcast, Christine. It's great to have you here today.
Thank you very much for having me.
I'm excited to dive in and learn a little bit more about specifically yoga for scoliosis. And I'm curious, can you tell us how your yoga journey got you to this place where you really you're focused in on yoga for scoliosis?
Yeah, sure. So basically, I was diagnosed at the age of 5 with scoliosis, with a structural scoliosis, and I had physiotherapy treatments. I had a heel lift in my shoes, so various different things. My mum looked into different exercises for me to do. At that time, in the 80s, yoga wasn't really on the list, so it was mainly ballet that they suggested because they felt like I would be taller and I would be straighter that way. And then I wasn't really having any sort of pain or anything until I was about 17, 18. So in my teenage years, that's really when it started. And that's when I started to become a little bit more sensible and started to look after myself a little bit more as well. And I just looked into different ways of helping me with the back pain. And then when I came to London in 2004, I went to my first yoga class. And I just after the first class, I felt immediately a lot better. And that was it then for me. So I went to any yoga class I could find. I really got into Ashtanga yoga. I really loved the strength of it, feeling strong and feeling much better in my body. And then, it kind of slowly developed from there. And probably about, I would say 2007, there was an article in the yoga journal about yoga for scoliosis. And it was written by Elise Miller-Browning. And that's kind of the first time I heard about yoga specifically for scoliosis. So I started to research it. I started to look for teachers who were teaching it, took some private lessons, and it kind of slowly developed from there. And then I kind of got into the whole, eventually I started doing my teacher training and then explored this a little bit more.
That's amazing. So did you along the way tell any of your yoga teachers, hey, I have scoliosis when you were attending class, or did you just attend and they didn't know?
That's a good question. So in the beginning, I did, because for me, it was a big issue. In a way, of course, anything to do with yourself is always a big issue. And then I felt like teachers were not taking much notice of it. And then I stopped telling people because I felt like they didn't really know what to do with the information.
Right.
So they knew, and they were just like, oh, okay. But then, it's almost like they didn't really know what this meant. They didn't give me any tips or didn't tell me, oh, you need to look out for this, you need to look out for that. So I just thought, oh, maybe it's just not relevant. Maybe I shouldn't say it. And I stopped telling people. And then when I worked with a few more experienced teachers, sometimes they would notice, so they would ask. And then, So
what would they notice then?
It's mainly teachers who have scoliosis themselves.
Right.
They would notice. So you can notice in a student, and that's a great tip for yoga teachers. When they come up from Uttanasana and you come up not with a long spine, but you come up rolling up, so vertebra by vertebra, and you're rolling up and you stand behind them. And it's actually called Adam's forward bend. So it's a technique of spotting scoliosis in people. And you can see a slight difference in height on one side of the spine to the other side of the spine. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. And so these were really observant teachers, I would say. And you said that they also know because they had scoliosis.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. I think, especially if you're working with lots of people with scoliosis, you have an eye for it, and you can even suspect it from when they're standing up. But that's then when it confirms it, if they're coming up from this from Uttanasana, and you can really see if they have scoliosis or not, or if it's a structural scoliosis.
So I hear you saying different types of scoliosis. First of all, let's rewind. And what would be the definition of scoliosis first, like an overall definition? Yeah,
so scoliosis is an abnormal lateral curve of the spine, and it's always got a rotation aspect to it as well. So we obviously have our 4 natural curves. So if we look at the spine from the side, we have the natural curves in the lumbar spine, obviously, and back of the neck and all of that. But this is a curve if you're looking at somebody from the back. So if somebody has a curve which is more than 10 degrees to the left or to the right from the back with a rotation, that's called scoliosis.
Okay. So I once went to see a body worker and he said to me, "You have mild scoliosis." Mm-hmm. I felt a little like, hey, wait a second. Are you allowed to diagnose me? So it's interesting. And I know as yoga teachers, we're not diagnosing, but
no.
Do you know
yes, and you have to be careful with this.
Yeah.
And also, unless they had an X-ray vision, it's very hard to be so specific and say you've got a mild scoliosis.
Okay. So I won't believe him unless I have an X-ray done. Then.
No, I wouldn't. Because as I said, anything from 10 degrees upwards is classified as scoliosis. So it would be between 11 and 20 or sometimes 25 degrees that is called a mild scoliosis. So again, they would have to have very, very good X-ray vision to be able to diagnose this. But what is interesting is, so there's a difference in a structural and a functional scoliosis. So structural meaning that structurally your spine is actually bent in one way or the other, so that the bones have shaped in a way that you have scoliosis. A functional scoliosis could just be a muscle imbalance. For example, if you're doing a very one-sided exercise, for years and years and years, carrying bags on one shoulder, things like that, or a leg length difference as well. That doesn't mean that the spine is actually crooked or scoliotic, but it means that there is some other muscle imbalance which might look like scoliosis, and that's called a functional scoliosis. So actually they say that about 80 to 90% of people have some sort of functional scoliosis, just because in a way, you know, people are really right-handed or always do activities with one side of the body. And I'm sure you've seen it in yoga students as well. Just the difference in shoulders, one shoulder rolls forward, things like that. So that is actually quite normal, but then it's only 2 to 3% of the population that have a structural scoliosis, or an actual one where the bones are shaped in a different way.
So you had that and you were diagnosed when you were 5. Were you born that way then?
I don't know is the honest answer. And it's very difficult to know. So they say 70% of scoliosis cases is idiopathic, so nobody knows where it's coming from. But usually they start at the age of somewhere between 10 and 18 years. So when we go through those major growth spurts, that's usually when scoliosis starts to appear. So it's only from what I can remember I'm pretty sure it was a lot earlier than that, that they noticed something. But luckily for me, it didn't get worse. So it just kind of stayed, probably because I was quite active and I did lots of exercise when I was a kid, and physiotherapy and all of that it remained stable. But it's really the teenage years when it's really, really important to monitor it and make sure to work with someone who knows what they're talking about. So especially if you're working with children, even just normal kids yoga classes. I know we're not supposed to diagnose, obviously, but I feel quite strongly about this subject, and I feel there's not enough screening in schools for this, especially in the UK. I don't know how it is in Canada, but in the UK they don't screen for it in schools. So how else are they supposed to know unless somebody else picks it up? And it's not necessarily the parent. It might be a PE teacher or a yoga teacher or somebody else.
So what might you see? What would the symptoms be, or what were you feeling when you were 5? You know, how did your mom know?
Well, I'm from Germany, and in Germany they did screen for it.
Okay.
So I was lucky in a way, because they just picked it up basically during just a regular checkup. And they were measuring leg length and all of this, and so they were quite thorough in that perspective. But I know over here in the UK they don't do it, and in other countries as well.
If we say we are teaching a children's yoga class, what might we see in a child who, and we could approach the parent and just say, I've noticed, like we could say what we notice, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, yeah. And you don't have to diagnose it at all, and just say you notice that there's a slight unevenness in the shoulders, and one shoulder might be higher than the other, especially if if you see anything, a difference in the shoulder blades, so one shoulder blade sticking out more than the other consistently, then that's usually one of the very easy to spot signs of where children might be developing scoliosis. So I feel there's no harm in telling a parent, and from a parent point of view, I would be very happy if somebody would point this out to me. if it then turns out to be right or wrong, I'd rather know and double check rather than not knowing. I don't know if you feel the same.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And I think also you're right, for phys ed teachers or for yoga teachers who are working with children. And just to go over that point again, because you said you're really passionate about this, you said that if it's caught in those growing years, in the, children to teen years, it can make a big difference.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So especially if it's before puberty, so if it's caught, let's say when they're 10 or 11, before they go through any major growth spurts, that's when yoga or different types of therapy can make a big difference. That's why they can also wear a brace, for example, and then wear this throughout the time when they're growing, and this can actually correct scoliosis in the end. So it's very important to catch it early. I don't want to say catch it because it sounds like a disease, but
yeah, but to be aware, like you said, then when it was caught when you were really young, then you could do physical therapy and things that really helped. So what sort of things, when you work one-on-one with people, what sort of yoga poses might you add in? And I know everyone's an individual, of course, and you work with that individual, but what are some of the considerations you make?
That's a difficult one.
Even around cueing. Like, do you say, straighten your spine?
Yeah, that's one of the things I don't think I ever said. Definitely not, because because somebody with scoliosis would be like, well, I can't, I'm sorry. I can't straighten my spine. So that's not very encouraging, obviously, for people. So I always say a long spine or tall or anything like this. So we want to encourage length in anything that we do. So there's, in terms of yoga poses, it depends on what the symptoms are, obviously, and how old the student might be. So younger people, I usually work on strengthening a lot more, making sure that the core strength is there, especially for teenagers. And then as we get older, yes, we also need strength, but we also need to release those really, really tight muscles, and they can be very, very tight. And they can either be long and tight on one side or short and tight on the other side. So I love using restorative yoga for scoliosis quite a lot. And I work with, first of all, releasing muscles. So I work kind of in 4 different steps. So releasing muscles, and then we work on lengthening. So again, so anything like downward dog, for example, really, really good to lengthen. And then we would derotate. So any twists, usually very good. And again, it depends on case by case, really, if it's beneficial for people or not. And then only towards the end, we would do some strengthening if the body is ready for it and if there's no pain. So usually if there's pain, it would just be restorative yoga. But yeah, I mean, yoga poses that are great. I love doing downward dog, and even if they can't do a full downward dog, we can always do half downward dog against the wall. Balancing poses, very important. So tree pose is one of the good ones to do. Anything in all fours, strengthening, cat cow, anything like that. Side plank is an interesting one. So there has been a study by a doctor called Dr. Loren Fishman, and he's done this study about people with scoliosis and found out that side plank, just this one yoga pose, can make a big difference and actually reverse curvature of scoliosis.
Wow.
And this study if you Google it, it's very, very well known. So you might get people actually coming to your class, especially if they have scoliosis, they might have looked into the subject. And usually if you type in yoga for scoliosis, at some point you will come across this doctor and you will come across this research study. So they might have even heard of this study before, and they might ask you about side plank and if you think that it is actually beneficial and can make a difference. So it's always good to kind of be aware of these things and these studies.
That's fantastic. If you have a link to that study, I'd love to put it in the show notes. I can search for it, and I can.
Yeah.
Great to add it in.
Yeah.
And so is there anything now with all of the learning and living in a body with scoliosis and the work that you do one-on-one with people, is there anything that when you go to a yoga class that you modify or change?
Yes, lots. And obviously being a yoga teacher helps because we know a lot more. One thing I would say as well is adjustments is another kind of slightly controversial subject, and I don't know if there's been a podcast on it yet, but some teachers love to give adjustments and some teachers don't and stay away from it. And I'm one of the ones probably in the middle somewhere, but I kind of try to stay away from them. And that is because I've been hurt in an adjustment before, and it could well have something to do with my scoliosis, which obviously it was a teacher trainee, so he wasn't aware of it. If he had been aware of it, I don't think anything different would have happened. But just to kind of to bear in mind that you will not be able to straighten somebody's spine. So if something looks not right to you, don't just try to kind of yank them into the right direction, which you think looks right to you, because what's going on in the body might be something completely different.
Yes, it makes total sense. And I wonder, what pose was it that you were in?
It was a wide-legged forward bend in an Ashtanga class, and he basically pushed me forward. So it's probably something that hopefully not many yoga teachers would do anyway. So right. It's one of those where you have to be very, very careful. But because I have a lumbar scoliosis, so in my lumbar spine, it makes my pelvis being slightly uneven, obviously. So he was pushing me evenly down forward, and he was quite happy because I could go forward. But then something went wrong, and one side of the hip gave in, and then I tore my hamstring on that one side.
Ouch. Yeah.
So yes, it was very painful. And he learned from it. And I learned from it as well. Just to say basically, stop, no thank you. So I'm always, and since then I am very, very careful with adjustments on other people, and I also don't accept them on myself very much unless I really know the teacher and I'm comfortable with them.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up because I didn't even think of that. And I have, even myself, I'll use myself as an example. When I was a newer teacher, I almost felt like it was my responsibility to go around and kind of make shapes with people. And I have dropped that, and it's almost like I cringe a little bit thinking about it. But I think that's a great point for all teachers to really know that, like you said, we don't have X-ray vision. We do not know what's going on in the body unless we're really maybe we have a training as massage therapists, or we've taken special training in terms of assisting or adjusting yoga poses. I think we do need to move in and assist with a lot of intention and also awareness. We have to have a lot behind that. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And just what you said, with intention. I think if you do give an adjustment, be very clear why you're doing it, and maybe even tell the student why you're doing it. So also for scoliosis, I think already just bearing in mind that somebody who has scoliosis might have been living with it for a long time. There might be physically something that they don't like about their body because of scoliosis. So feeling imperfect, something is wrong with me, I'm crooked, I look a bit strange. And then you go to a yoga class, and basically the yoga teacher tells you, no, you're doing every single pose wrong. You should be doing it this way and that way. It can feel quite negative to a student, I think. But if you say, oh, maybe, your hips looked a little bit uneven this way, so I'm just straightening them out. I think there's a different way of kind of approaching this, rather than just blindly pulling people into different yoga poses and adjusting them in that way. So light touch. I like to use a light touch. And a lot of verbal guidance. So if you see that in a downward dog, for example, that the hips are literally going to one side, before you start touching them, why not say lengthening through the right side of the waist a little bit more, or something like that?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think then that it gives a completely different experience, and the student will learn so much more from it. If they start to do it themselves, rather than you getting involved and doing it for them.
That is such a fantastic point, that if we can cue and the students find it themselves, they're not really relying on us then. Sure, they relied on us for just having a view from, outside of their body, but then they can find it, and then they can find it again. Whereas if we're moving in right away, assisting or adjusting, with hands-on, they might feel like, oh, I need the teacher to guide me there and lead me there.
Yes, exactly. And it is very helpful to have a yoga teacher. Well, especially with scoliosis, because you won't know what is balanced, what is straight, and what is not. If you have scoliosis, you just feel slightly off center most of the time. So it is very helpful to have a yoga teacher there, but just guiding people in the right way, I think, is very, very important.
Are there any poses that you take out of your own practice, or you just take out when you're working one-on-one with people?
Out of my own practice, I have taken out shoulder stand.
Mm-hmm.
Slightly controversial, maybe. But with scoliosis, very often there comes a slight kyphosis as well, so rounding of the upper back. So I just don't feel it's beneficial for me at this moment, which is why I don't practice it. So I'd rather practice Viparita Karani or different inversions in that way. What else? Yoga poses to avoid, you're saying?
Yeah, if there are any. And I know that when you work one-on-one with people, because we've had conversations before, it's very much about that individual. But if there's anything else that you think, you know what, it wouldn't be my go-to pose for someone with scoliosis.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody has a structural problem, I would probably not start them off with a headstand. It's kind of common sense, isn't it? If they find it difficult to stand up straight, I wouldn't put them on their head.
Right.
It is all kind of common sense. Now, there is things to consider when somebody has spinal fusion or Herrington rods. So that's basically lots of metal in their backs to straighten their spines. And Herrington rods, they don't do that anymore. But if you have students over the age of like 35, then there might well be some people who have them. And it just means that they physically are not able to flex or extend the spine very much, or even do twists. So you just have to be very, very mindful. But they will know, and that's why it's so important to kind of teach body awareness. That's one of the major things, I think. And just teach them to really go with what sensations they can feel, not go beyond that. And then just very, very gentle movements, and always with that length, long spine in mind. If you're folding forwards, always folding forwards from the hips, never folding from the waist, and things like that.
There was a student who came to my class who had rods in her back, and she was unable to lie comfortably on her back. So she would often, modify with a blanket. And there were times where I thought, I don't know what she feels like. I don't know. She was great at letting me know, and I would offer modifications. If it looked like she was uncomfortable at all, I would offer her a modification on her side if we were doing work on the back.
Yes, and I found that as well with people, lots of people with scoliosis, even without spinal fusion. Lying on the back is not comfortable because of the rotation, and especially if you have scoliosis in the thoracic spine, the rib cage will be rotated, so the ribs are flaring out at the back. If you can imagine, there will be a rib hump on one side, and that is simply not comfortable. If you're then lying on your back on a hard surface, you'll be rolling over to one side. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. So normally then you would sort of modify or take out the poses where you're lying on your back if you were working with
someone. I kind of see how mobile people are, because some people are just physically afraid that they can't get back up if they get down on the floor, in which case I would start yoga just sitting on a chair, or just do standing poses, or however they are comfortable. If they're otherwise quite fit and healthy and are able to get up and down from the floor, I do think that the floor can be, just working with gravity can be really, really beneficial. And a lot of the restorative yoga poses are obviously lying on the floor, and just if you're supported in the right way with lots of bolsters and blankets, then we can definitely make it more comfortable. So if you have someone who's uncomfortable lying on the back, and they feel really uneven, so you could put like a little cushion, for example, under one side of the back to make them feel a little bit more even, but really going with the sensations that are they feeling, not what you think looks straight or looks even.
Right. So, that's a great point, that it's how they feel in their body instead of what you're seeing externally.
Yes.
So it sounds like to me that it is much easier to work one-on-one with someone who has scoliosis.
Rather than in a group class, you mean?
Yeah. I mean, overall, I lean that way anyway.
Yes.
I feel like everyone should have some one-on-one yoga time. I like group classes too.
Yeah. Yes. So I like to see people one-on-one a few times, and then have them in my group classes if they have scoliosis, just for them to give them a little bit more time, and for me to kind of get to know them a little better, give them some more different cues on, what to look out for, which side to lengthen and which side needs to strengthen a little bit more, and things like that. I do have people in my group classes who just who have scoliosis and who I haven't seen on a one-to-one basis, but they're usually very confident, and they have good body awareness already. So I think it depends on the individual.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you wish that yoga teachers knew about scoliosis so that they could work with people in a group class or one-on-one session? Is there anything else that you can think of that we haven't touched on?
I feel like there's a lot of talk about what poses you should do and what you shouldn't do, and some people will tell you, no, scoliosis, you never do twists, you shouldn't do back bends and things like that. I feel quite strongly that it's not about the pose, it's about how you practice the pose. So it's teaching people body awareness and allowing for them to grow and to explore. And if you might find that it might be quite amazing to see them all of the sudden going into quite advanced poses, and you might have not even expected it before. And this can be very, very empowering for people with scoliosis who have been always told, oh, you've got this spinal condition and basically you're going to suffer from it your whole life and you're going to have terrible backache and stuff. So all of the sudden advancing in yoga poses and maybe going into wheel pose and things like that you would have never expected them to do can be really, really empowering, and just supporting them in that way, rather than saying, don't do this, don't do that. Encouraging and just going with wherever they are, meeting them where they are.
That's amazing. If people are wanting to work one-on-one with you, say they have scoliosis, or if yoga teachers are wanting to reach out to you to get a little more help, can you talk a little bit about your website and your Facebook group?
Yes, so I've got a Facebook group. It's called Yoga for Scoliosis Community, and it's a lovely group, very, very supportive. It's all either people who have scoliosis. It's lots of parents with children who've got scoliosis, and then yoga teachers as well who are interested in exploring the subject or who might have scoliosis themselves. I usually post a video every week with a new kind of small tutorial of different curves or different yoga poses, adapting them for scoliosis, and then generally kind of supporting each other and getting to know some other people who are going through the same thing. So that's the Facebook group. And then I do one-to-one sessions in person. Obviously, if anybody wants to come to New Malden in the UK, then you can obviously do that. Otherwise, I offer sessions via Zoom as well. So either working with a student one-on-one, or kind of mentoring calls for yoga teachers as well. If you've got a student who has scoliosis and you're not quite sure what to do and how to approach it and all of that.
Well, that's fantastic. I am sure that some people will reach out for definitely the Facebook group. I think it's amazing that you're posting videos in there all of the time and that everyone's having discussion in there. And what is your website then?
My website is www.jaureguiberry.net. And yes, Facebook community is called Yoga for Scoliosis Community, so it's quite easy to find. If you type that into Facebook, it comes up straight away.
Awesome. And we'll put a link to both of those in our show notes. Thank you so much for your time today and just for your knowledge and wisdom and for sharing that with us.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Thank you so much, Christine, for sharing all of this information about scoliosis. I feel like I had a lot of questions and I learned a lot from today's conversation. If you feel like you want to learn more, Christine has an amazing online course for yoga teachers. I will link to that in our show notes. And just for our listeners, Christine is giving every one of you 10% off of her online course. There's 3 modules to this. It's the introduction of everything you need to know about scoliosis if you're working with those who have this, or if you yourself have it and you want to use yoga. On top of this, Christine is doing a giveaway for one person who shares a comment in the show notes page of this episode. So you'll go to the connectedyogateacher.com/84 for those show notes and leave a question. You can ask a question. You can tell Christine why you love this episode or how it has impacted your teaching. And then we'll do a draw. And the winner will be gifted Christine's Introduction to Teaching Yoga for Scoliosis. So this is her 3-module online course. And you could win just by leaving a comment. So thank you so much, Christine, for doing a giveaway. I always feel like it's such an amazing part of my job when our guests have something that they're willing to give away. Speaking of gifts, I don't really want anything gift-wise for my birthday, which is tomorrow if you're listening in real time, but I would love it if you left a review. So if you haven't left a review on iTunes or on our Facebook page, please do that. If you have done that, then share the podcast, this episode or another one that you really love. Share it with a yoga teacher or a group of yoga teachers that you know. Thank you, Kathleen, for writing me this email note and for saying yes that I could share it on the podcast. Kathleen said, just wanted to extend my heartfelt thanks for the resources and inspiration you provided for my About page. I listened to your podcast interview with Trevor, then requested and worked through your worksheets. I was able to complete it this weekend. It's a work in progress and may be a bit long, but it's mine, and for now, it fits the bill. Kathleen, thank you so much for sending this note. And also, this is just a reminder that always our websites are a work in progress. I think they are. And it's better to have something up there than nothing at all. So thanks for sending that. If anyone is interested in doing that work, it was episode 29 with Trevor Parks, and him and I walked through some important points for an About Me page. And then I created an email sign up that anyone can do. So go to the connectedyogateacher.com/29 for that. And I'll put a link in our show notes in case you're like, I can't write this all down, Shannon. I'm out busy doing something. It's all in the episode show notes. Thank you also to Kathy, who wrote, this is a wonderful group for sharing and gathering ideas relating to yoga and anything relating to the philosophy of yoga. So helpful to me. The podcasts are also very insightful. Thank you, Kathy, for taking the time to write that review on our Facebook page. Thank you to our team. This podcast is made possible because of you, Laura, Samantha, and Suzanne. And thank you, listeners. You really are the reason why we're here. We're doing this. We create the content for you, and we just want to support you so that you can share the yoga that lights you up. Have a fantastic week.